Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The United Kingdom, along with 25 allies, have called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, condemning Israel's aid restrictions and civilian deaths. They also oppose any forced displacement of Palestinians and back a negotiated peace. A military trainer jet has crashed into a school campus in Dhaka, Bangladesh, killing at least 19 people. Over 50 others, including children, were burnt and hospitalized. Israeli forces have entered central Gaza's Deir al-Balah, a haven for thousands of displaced civilians. The ground push was backed by airstrikes as Israel targets areas where hostages may be held. Israeli airstrikes destroyed a recently rebuilt dock at Hodeidah port, according to a Houthi security official in Yemen. The Israeli army said it targeted military infrastructure and naval vessels used for combat purposes. Russian drones and missiles have hit Kiev, killing 2 and damaging homes, a nursery and metro shelters. Ukrainian President Zelensky called it an assault on humanity as France's top diplomat arrived to condemn the strikes. Tehran will hold trilateral talks with China and Russia on Tuesday over its nuclear program. The meeting comes amid European warnings of possible sanctions. Iran will meet European powers on Friday in Turkey for fresh talks on its nuclear program after recent US airstrikes on Iranian facilities. The E3 nations warn sanctions could be reimposed if Iran refuses to cooperate. Torrential rainfall in South Korea has left at least 18 dead and 9 missing, according to the Interior Ministry. The worst-hit regions continue to struggle with damage from floods and landslides. Now for our top story, we start in the Middle East, where a powerful joint statement from 26 countries, including the United Kingdom, France, Japan and Canada, are calling for an immediate end to the war in Gaza. The nations warn that the suffering of Gaza's civilian population has reached new depths, with more than 800 Palestinians reportedly killed while trying to access food and water. The group slammed Israel's restrictions on aid, calling the current system dangerous and a violation of human dignity. They condemned the continued detention of hostages by Hamas, but also blasted Israel's plans for forced displacement, calling it unlawful under international law. The statement urges an unconditional, permanent ceasefire and warns that settlement expansions in the West Bank could destroy prospects for a two-state solution. With the war's human cost mounting, these nations say the world can no longer wait. We're now joined by John Rossomando, who's the president of Viking Research Associates and geopolitical analyst. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. to discuss this story. John, thank you very much for joining us, as always. John, this is striking, something that some of these countries, Israel, would previously have called very, very close allies. That including the United Kingdom, including France, you have that of New Zealand, all of these Western countries, Japan. What are your thoughts on this joint statement by these over 20 countries, 26 nations altogether? Do you think Israel is losing, is at real trouble of becoming a rogue state?
Well, I think that Israel has completely lost the PR war. And also the other thing you have to consider is a lot of these countries like the UK, France, have burgeoning Muslim populations that are, gravely affected by the war in Gaza. And, there's a push to get Israel to end its military offensive. I think there's a lot to be said from a counterinsurgency perspective that Israel has failed to end the Hamas insurgency. At the same time, you have a civilian population that is trapped and can't go anywhere, that by different states is on the verge of starvation. So there are a lot of different areas where Israel has failed strategically.
Yes, John. I want to get on to a part of the statement. It says, "We condemn the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children seeking their most basic needs of water and food. It's horrifying that over 800 Palestinians have been killed while seeking aid." Now, John, this obviously comes from the likes of the United Kingdom. Israel has said, Israel has rejected these numbers. These numbers, of course, come from the United Nations. What does it say that the allies of Israel, previous allies of Israel, are going against Israeli rhetoric here?
Well, I think that you have, again, you have to consider the burgeoning Muslim populations in these countries. So they have to consider their domestic politics, in what they're doing. And the United Nations has proven to be unreliable in terms of its handling of the situation in Gaza, because it relies heavily on numbers from Hamas. I mean,
this isn't just France and the UK, though, giving these statements. This is 26 nations here. You have the likes of Japan, you have the likes of Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, and Italy, who have far-right governments in power right now, who are very, very much are spoken out against immigration to their country. Critics would say that this isn't about religion. This is about humanity, as they put it in their statement.
Europe has, across Europe, you have the same situation that you have in France and in Germany. I mean, not Germany, France and England. But I think what we're seeing is that people are just tired of the war in Gaza. They're tired of seeing Israel bombing and without any end in sight and without any threshold of victory. I mean, the idea of displacing the Palestinian population from Gaza is something that is anathema under the 1949 Geneva Convention that speaks out against deportations. So I think that there's a lot riding here, and I think that Israel needs to pay closer attention to how it's losing the PR war.
Yes, and John, some critics obviously argue that US military and financial support for Israel undermines its ability to condemn these restrictions on aid. Also, the fact that the US does back the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. How do you reconcile American assistance with the calls for human dignity in Gaza?
Well, I think you also have to look at the fact that there are over 50,000 or so estimated Hamas fighters that have continued the war in Gaza. And the last time we had a ceasefire, Hamas broke the ceasefire. I'm talking about before the October 7th massacre. So I think that Israel has seen a pattern of every time that it's agreed to what they call a hudna, or a temporary truce, Hamas breaks it by firing rockets at Israel, and then with the latest massacre. So I think that the U.S. supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas, but I think that we've seen after close to 3 years that it's failed to pacify Hamas, and I think that the U.S. needs to put pressure on Israel to reach some sort of agreement to bring a permanent end to this war.
Yes, John, another thing that's mentioned in this is the expansions of settlements in the West Bank. Just the other day, we saw a US citizen killed, a Palestinian American who was from Florida. He was killed in the West Bank by Israeli settlers. We've had some US politicians call for these settlers to be punished. Do you think the US is doing enough to prevent these settlements in the West Bank that some claim are supported by the Israeli government, especially once one of its own citizens has just been killed by said settlers?
Well, I just simply have to say that the United States has been, across Democrat and Republican administrations, has condemned Israel for building settlements since the 1970s, and it hasn't had any appreciable impact. I think that we have to look at the extremists on both sides and condemn the extremists, these extreme ultra-Zionist settlers who committed this heinous act, and at the same time, condemn the extremists on the other side. So there seems to be an evaporating middle here.
Yes, indeed, and obviously the United States is absent from this list of countries. There has been, according to a recent poll, it's been the lowest in 25 years, with still a small majority, but only 54% of Americans now hold a favourable view of Israel. It's its lowest since 2000. What are your thoughts about the relations between Israel and the United States right now, and how are people feeling in the United States, especially given Israel's current actions about its war in Gaza, its strikes on Syria, and its war with Iran, of course?
Well, I think that Americans have watched the Israeli war in Gaza for 3 years, and they're kind of tired of it. They're tired of seeing the constant Israeli bombings, and it's undermined Israel's perception in the United States. I mean, Israel has definitively lost the public relations war here, as opposed to taking out a counterinsurgency strategy aimed at winning hearts and minds. It's completely failed, and Netanyahu doesn't want to compromise and end the conflict.
John Rossomando, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Pleasure having you, as always. We now turn over to Europe, where at a high-level military summit today, Ukraine's Defence Minister Denys Shmyhal made 3 critical appeals to Ukraine's defence partners in light of the ongoing war with Russia. He urgently requested American air defence systems, particularly Patriot missiles, to protect against continued Russian missile and drone attacks that have been devastating civilian infrastructure. Shmyhal also asked for $6 billion in financial support to close Ukraine's procurement gap, allowing the production of drones and long-range weapons. Finally, he called for partners to start including Ukraine in their 2026 defence budgets and for secure loans to sustain next year's efforts. The meeting marks a key moment as Shmyhal and other top officials meet with Ukraine Defence Contact Group, a coalition of over 50 countries coordinating military aid to Ukraine defence support. We are now joined by Raymond Vickery, who's a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Raymond, as always, for joining us on the programme. Raymond, how do you assess the strategic importance here of deploying this Patriot missile system in Ukraine's current status in this conflict?
Well, thanks very much, Thomas, for having me.
Of course.
It seems to me that with all that's going on with Gaza, the Iran situation, tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, that the centrality of the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been put aside. We're no longer focused on what a significant breach of the international law and understandings that were reached after World War II to try to preserve the peace and prevent another world war. What has happened here is that the invasion has breached this anti-imperialism that you could take territory from someone else by force. It is the only and most significant breach of its kind in the 80 some odd years since World War II. So the ability to be able to defend against this kind of invasion and to restore principles which are enshrined in the United Nations Charter is fundamental. Right now, as has just recently been reported, there have been yet more drone attacks. The Patriot system is really without peer in the world in being able to defend against those kinds of drone attacks. So unless you have that kind of defensive ability, the resolution of what is now a 3-year-old breach of the principles of the UN Charter is going to continue. Unfortunately, the United States has ceded its position of leadership in trying to restore these principles and move to a transactional approach. But it is now, it seems to me, the obligation of all the great democracies, India, Europe, Japan, Australia, to be able to refocus on this invasion and be able to support the provision of adequate defensive systems such as the Patriot system to defend against Russia.
Raymond, we've seen obviously an ever-changing stance when it comes to Donald Trump and this war. He famously said he would end it in 24 hours. We're now 6 months into his second presidential term. Looking beyond immediate aid, what role should the US play in developing Ukraine's own defense industrial base for sustainability after this war? After this war.
Well, I think that the United States has to reject the Trump view of international relations as simply being some sort of continuing real estate transactions where you try to make the best deal that will benefit you, and you don't look at the overall relationship, you don't look at the question of values, you don't look at a question of institutions and rule of law. Now, lately, President Trump has seen, I think, the folly of his putting so much trust in Putin. He, as you have indicated, famously said, day one, this is going to be over, that he was someone who could make the deal and end it. That just is not going to work. It hasn't going to work, and it's not going to work going forward. So one can only hope that because Putin is offending the ego of President Trump now, that he will at least be able to provide some of the wherewithal for Ukraine to defend itself. But this is not going to be an adequate approach going forward. What is required is cooperation between all the democracies of Europe particularly, and the United States and throughout the world, to be able to rein in these imperialistic tendencies of Putin and others, whether it be China trying to take areas by force, or whether it be Russia trying to do that. This is a very, very dangerous situation and requires long-term cooperation. You know, peace, like war, must be waged. It can't be done on a transactional basis.
Yes, Raymond Vickery, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Pleasure, as always. We now move over to South America for our next story, where Chilean President Gabriel Boric is hosting a high-stakes summit in Santiago with left-wing leading leaders from Brazil, Colombia, Spain and Uruguay under the banner Democracy Always. The one-day event promotes multilateralism and global cooperation, but risks provoking Donald Trump. Fresh off his 50% tariffs on Brazil, Trump has warned that he won't hesitate to target critics of his trade policies. While Brazil's Lula has already sparred with Trump over the BRICS summit, Boric's weaker domestic position and Chile's economic dependence on the United States make this a bigger gamble. With copper, Chile's main export, now in Trump's crosshairs, any backlash could carry real economic consequences. Now we move over to the Indo-Pacific, where in Japan, the far-right Sansito party made significant strides in the country's upper house election, securing 14 seats after celebrating a victory at a rally in Tokyo on Monday. The party, which emerged during the COVID-19 pandemic, gained support through a mix of conspiracy theories, anti-immigration rhetoric, and promises for tax cuts and welfare spending. Protesters also gathered at the rally, with Miroko Kato, a vocal critic of the party, speaking out against the dangerous misinformation targeting foreigners, which she believes played a role in Sanseto's electoral success. Led by Sohei Kamiya, a former supermarket manager, the party has drawn comparisons to the right-wing populist movements in the US and Europe, though such policies have yet to gain widespread traction in Japan. Despite this, Sanseto's recent gains remarks a significant moment in the nation's political landscape. We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, who's a fellow at the Hudson Institute located in Tokyo, Japan, to discuss this in further detail. Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us. How unexpected was this result? 14 seats for a far-right party in Japan. What is your reaction to this, and do you see this support increasing?
Yes, current world trend is affecting Japan. That is true, because this Sanseto's slogan is the Nippon first, Japan meaning Japan first. So looks like the American first. But many young people vote for this party, compared with more elderly people. So I did not vote for the Sanseto, but at the same time, there are three reasons. I believe the Sanseto is still not so radical compared with other party in the world. Because firstly, the leader of the Sanseto Kamiya, Denys, the policies, he do not, or Sanseto will not push the foreigners out from Japan. So he clearly denied this policy. So, and secondly, most voters who vote for the Sanseto did not check the manifesto of the Sanseto, I believe. Why they vote for the Sanseto? Because this is new, because they are searching the conservative party instead of the current ruling party, Liberal Democratic Party, because they want to express a complaint towards the current government is led by the Prime Minister Ishiba. So that's why they are searching, but they cannot be the liberal or left wing, so that's why they are searching right wing party, and Sanseto accept these votes. And thirdly, even if the Sanseto has expanded 14 times, but originally their seat was only one. So that's why 14 is very big, but 14 is within the 250. So 14 is small. So that's why, so 14 plus 1, then 15 total indeed. But anyway, the 15 in the 250. So that's why the influence of the Sanseto is still limited. Such kind of number of the people who support the right party, this is natural indeed. So Japan is not a radical country. This is just the trend of the world, but still very limited number and a very natural move, I believe.
Some great insight there. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao. You are staying with us to discuss further details. However, for our next story, we move to South Asia, where images have emerged from Dhaka, where a Bangladesh Air Force training jet crashed into a school, killing at least 19 people. The F-7 BGI aircraft slammed into Milestone School and College in the city's Uttara district, injuring more than 160 others. Real footage showed chaos, students being carried out, smoke pouring from the site and firefighters battling flames amidst scorched debris. Part of the building was torn open, with walls collapsed and structures twisted by the impact. The military confirmed the incidents as Bangladesh's worst aviation disaster in decades, adding that a full inquiry is now underway to determine what went wrong. Now we move over to Africa, where Kenyan human rights activist Boniface Mugwabi has been released on bail after facing charges of illegally possessing tear gas canisters and a blank rifle round. Police say they found the items at his home during a weekend raid, but Mugwabi, a vocal government critic, calls the case a big shame and says there is no evidence against him. His arrest has sparked outrage, coming weeks after the death of a political blogger in police custody triggered massive anti-government demonstrations. At least 50 people have died in the violent unrest since. Hundreds of supporters packed the courtroom on Monday as Mugwabi appeared before a judge. His lawyer thanked the court for granting bail, while activists warn the government's crackdown on dissent is escalating. Mugwabi, known for his anti-corruption stance, has been a symbol of resistance against police brutality and government abuse. Let's listen in to what the activist had to say.
What you have is of three dictators, Suluhu in Tanzania, Museveni in Uganda, and Ruto in Kenya. They're all reading from the same playbook. Go after your opponents, demonize them, arrest them on terrorist charges, and try and make this thing about individuals. But what you're fighting for is not about ourselves. It's about the rule of law in this country, upholding the... We're being called terrorists because
We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao once again to discuss this story. How does this arrest, Dr. Nagao, and subsequent bail reflect on Kenya's commitment to civil liberties and law, and how do you analyse the situation that's going on in the African country right now?
Okay, this is release of him is a very good and democratic move of Kenya. Kenya developed a democratic country, but at the same time, this situation reflects the current toughness for Kenya too. Because after the COVID-19 crisis, Kenya's economy hasn't recovered well. So that's why there are complaints in the country and the demonstration against the government, especially the President William Ruto rights very much. So last year, when the demonstration happened, government itself tried to resign, except the leader, but this hasn't worked. Now, this year, he tried to crack down the demonstration itself, so he changed the tactics. But still, the complaint itself is exists because the cause of the problem hasn't solved yet. So this is the recovery of economy and adjusting the new situation after the COVID-19. So that is needed. And so without good method to recover the economy, indeed they will face, this government continue to face the same problem. And that's why, of course, under the democratic country, the leader of the demonstration should not be charged as a terrorist. But at the same time, what government should do is they must recover the economy.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, thank you very much as always for joining us on the programme. It's always a pleasure having you. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.